I think about 2 weeks ago, I wrote to you because I've been trying to come up with the idea of this program. I have a one-off concert with the Metropolitan Opera, which our viewers are going to see coming up shortly. And and I wanted to find a way to meet the moment head on that we're living in
Mm.
this extraordinary 2020, right? To meet it head on, to not avoid what we're all living, which is rage, anger, fear, uncertainty, despair. All of this, we're experiencing it in different levels and in different ways and in different environments, but it's present for so many of us. But I didn't want to just stay there because what I know is that music is a lifeline. I know that music can help pull us out of that darkness.
Right.
And I've experienced it myself and so many people listening. It's why they come and turn to music as you did that night, as you turned to Marvin Gaye. I love that. And so I was thinking how to build this program. And part of meeting the storm head on is to not shy away from what is it's a worldwide problem, of course, but it's in a such a boiler point moment right now, which is the United States of America addressing our race issue.
Hmm.
There's two things. We're both from Kansas City,
Yeah.
okay? And we have both taken very, very, very different routes to end up in this conversation, right? And routes that highlight a lot of the issues that inequalities and um, beautiful things about America and difficult things about America and about life.
Hmm.
And so I thought I want to go to somebody who knows a different path than me, and I want to hear their point of view. And I thought of you. And at the same time, I thought of this Langston Hughes poem. So you speak about music and poetry being these really fundamental ways to examine our humanity and to not only receive it, but to express it when you sing, when you recite poetry. And I asked you to set this Langston Hughes poem. I love that you both share the same last name,
Right.
but I Dream a World. And you've turned this around in just a matter of days. And I've been sitting at the piano here in my home in Spain, and I've been playing with it. And this is what I love about this art form of music is we're pulling the words from somebody who had his own experience. You know, he wrote this in the early 20th century. Two people from Kansas City from very different life experiences, and we're going to combine all of this and we're going to create a new piece of art and we're going to premiere it here on this concert for the
Yeah.
Metropolitan Opera and the global audience. Can you talk to me just a little bit about, first of all, what you thought when I asked you to write, why you said yes, because you didn't take long to say yes, and then how you went about writing this, because I also know that you went through a lot of emotional journey in the
Mm.
struggle in the writing of this.
Well, I said yes because and so quickly because frankly I just the opportunity to work with you is just great. I mean, never mind your skill and ability and accomplishments and those things are wonderful, obviously, and you've earned them. But frankly, it's just because I enjoy your company. I enjoy knowing how I and Cecily and you know some of the men that you know I've left behind in that space, you know, in that place. I it warms me to know that we are present in your thoughts when we are not present with you, and it warms me because you are present with me. You know, Cecily and I mention you often, and it's just you know so that's a so any opportunity to work with you, I'm gonna jump at the opportunity.
Mhm.
And secondly, which is not quite the same, but kind of is, the opportunities that we've had to work together. It's funny. I had a place for us. I took out a place for us. I can't find the finished score. I went had to go back to the
There is a place for us.
things that, yeah, the things that come out of it are so good that that I was go do that, you know. So that's that. As far when what I thought of when you mentioned it, it's funny you mentioned you and I. Langston Hughes is from Missouri as well, and Missouri has a very complicated history, especially within the context of the United States when it comes to racism and slavery and even now because there's I forgot who said it. I wish that I could have credited them. They said it says the history isn't. It says history isn't the past isn't history. It's not even past. And the point being that it wasn't even that long ago. And
Mm.
I know that when you mentioned, when you were discussing the idea of the Langston Hughes poem, first of all, we weren't sure exactly, you know, whether we would use it, how we'd be able to use it, what the context of it might or might not be. The other thing is it was unclear to me how to said it because Langston Hughes is such a like rhythm is such an important part of what of his particular of his poetry, like his style, and so many times and sometimes it's not necessarily and matter of fact almost always it's not a rigid meter. It's not, you know, the scansion isn't, but you can't afford, I can't afford to be messing up a Langston Hughes poem, but it idea of it was pleasing. And I do like the poem, and I liked, frankly, the other aspect of it that I know I haven't mentioned this to you before, but I feel like most people in this moment and who went to a Langston Hughes poem would have very possibly gone to A Raisin in the Sun. They would have gone to The Dream Deferred, and in this moment, or maybe you know, that life's not a crystal stair, like these things that seem to be preoccupied with the inequality and the injustice, as opposed to this poem, which is so much more hopeful, which is dreaming. And I think that it resonated in a particular way. I know that I mentioned this to you, and that is the sort of parallel between this and Dr. King's dream speech, and just what these things are right now. I have a piece myself called Dreams They Go, and this idea of what dreams you can hold on to and which ones to keep you, to sustain you through the things that I've gone through. And I think that's a universal idea. This premise or this idea, this principle of dreams in general, and the fact that they're beautiful and they're wonderful, but you really can only have them fully while you're asleep, and then they're not real, or when you're awake and they require such labor and effort and time to make manifest. And so
Mm.
this dichotomy that seems to be, to me, to be a really excellent reflection of where the United States right now as a nation is, and our sort of national identity and our sort of understanding. I feel like there's an entire section, there's an entire segment of our population that has been living in a dream. They have believed things to be true that were not. And there's another segment that has been saying, hey, things are not like you seem to think. We are telling you that we are suffering. We are telling you that these things are happening. And obviously the flashpoint, or the wake up, the alarm clock, if you will, can be sort of pinpointed to George Floyd's murder. Well, frankly, no, not George Floyd's killing, but the fact of it being broadcast. Because the truth is, these people are dying in the United States in that way, or at least being treated that way quite regularly. It's not an uncommon occurrence. Most don't die, and then when they do, there's very rarely footage of it. This thing was so shocking. It was an alarm clock. It was that jarring sort of waking that one gets when you are deep in slumber and you are snatched all the way to full wakefulness. And this thing now, this sort of fighting to come to grips with reality as it is, and also I think trying to understand the dream that we have been wakened from, and a recognition that it is not perhaps it is a dream in the first sense, in that it's not real, but there is another dream that we can work toward. And as we've wrestled with these lyrics, as you know, as you and I have communicated, and Craig has communicated, and we've moved around these melodies and trying to understand how to articulate them, especially as I was nearing the end. It's very frustrating for me. That seems like not the best adjective, but in Wisconsin, another man was killed, and when Jacob was shot and killed, like shot 7 times, and then I was feeling like,
Uh, but he didn't die.
no, I'm sorry, he didn't die. I'm sorry, right? He's in the hospital. I apologize. He's
But
paralyzed.
he was shot 7 times in the back.
Times he's not, he didn't pass, and felt I felt incredibly just sort of disheartened, and it was very, to be frank with you, it was difficult to because I knew that I knew what I wanted, and I think it is in keeping with what Langston Hughes has articulated in his poet, in the poem specifically, and he very clearly treats with injustice and inequality but there is a hopeful arc, right? There is a hopeful arc. He is speaking of a dream of a world, while clearly and plainly stating a very accurate understanding of the world in which he lives. So this is not a man who is asleep.
No.
This is a man who is moving towards a vision. So the dream in this case is a vision, and vision, in order for vision to be made real, it requires this effort. But it also requires a certain amount of faith and belief that it can be made real. And to be honest with you, just in that moment, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So so to be honest with you, in that moment, I did not feel any particular faith that such a dream is attainable.
Yeah.
And so that's it was it became surprisingly difficult to come to the end of, and when I say the end, I mean we're talking about just a few notes, but I knew how I wanted them to feel. But like chords, I was playing chords and they were all dissonant, and it was just a really
Dark.
yeah, I couldn't quite it's interesting. The interesting thing I had not thought about until right now, so please pardon me, as because I haven't actually articulated any of these things before as much as I may have felt them. I realize now that I've not had the opportunity to speak them aloud. But the melody actually didn't change, which is interesting. The melody was, for me, largely established early on, with a couple of differences in that there were certain places where, as I sang it, it went lower, and a certain sort of, well, my own individual sort of feel, and then as I was listening to your pieces, and I wanted to lift up certain parts, and they also lifting them up gave it an interesting sort of hope in certain places. But that said, the melody was largely done. It was the setting of the chords, which make them, which frankly, without context, the melody, it's just not, it's not full. It's not. The context is what makes it. Which of the, if you will, like if the context is the world, if the chord is the world in which the melody lives, the which of the notes the chord is of which the chord is composed that the melody plays along or chooses to avoid or finds itself in dissonance with or rubs against or lands squarely on, whatever these things. um, those are the things that really define the melody. Those are the things that define what the feeling is, because the very same melody can be sung or played over a chord progression that's major or a chord progression that's minor, and you come up with a very, very different thing. So that interaction is what is important. And I was finding that at the end, that interaction, it was very, very difficult for me to find a hopeful one. And I know the math, so I was able to play chords that were hopeful because, that's what the math is, but they didn't feel honest. They didn't feel true. And
Yeah.
it was very disappointing. And this may seem, this is sort of conversely. So here's the weird thing: things have gotten so bad right now that I've become more hopeful.
Ah,
It's weird to say that, but it's because I feel like something is being lanced. I feel like things that have long been hidden in the dark and that therefore continue to sort of exude their toxicity, on this sort of low level and high level in some places, like there are spikes and whatever, but because it wasn't drawn out, I feel like there was a drawing out and exposure, the thing that will allow, they say that sunlight is the best antiseptic. And for this particular infection, for this particular condition, we have to see it in order to treat with it, in order to really, really come to grips with it. And I feel like what we are seeing right now is the exposure of these things that have so long lain within the United States and the very clear delineation of position. We have come to a point in this country, and I'm also seeing many protests and circumstances all over the world, frankly, where people are kind of presented with a very binary choice. Like we are presented with things to say, hey, this is bad or not. And like this is a defining moment of which side of this we'll choose to be on. And I think the reason it has become so volatile is that those who are standing, who are grappling and holding to some of these ideas as though they were not bad, as though they were righteous or just, are kind of forced to do so blatantly, not be able, you can no longer passively or just pretend as though, no, we have to declare ourselves right now. And what I'm seeing is that, first of all, far more people are declaring themselves to be against these things. They are to be against these atrocities, to be for equality, be for justice. Many people are acknowledging, I didn't know. And they're saying, listen, I thought I knew, and I apologize because that ignorance was to whatever extent willful in that it was comfortable,
mhm.
but it was not willful in the sense that it was malicious. It is where we live and how our unfortunately insular lives shape our society. But now that individuals do know, there are so many people. I spoke to a friend, I spoke to, frankly, my father-in-law, who during the 60s was in these circumstances, in the 50s and 60s, they were moving and seeing these marches and acting and making changes. And they were like, listen, the demographic of those groups that we were walking with were brown and black folks with a smattering of lighter complexions. But right now, it is, you can see entire groups of entire protests that have only a few black or brown faces in them. It,
Mhm.
the representation of protesters, the representation of people demanding equality is a more accurate representation of the population of our nation. And it I take encouragement from that in the context that no matter as bad as it is, and it is getting bad. It is mind-blowingly bad. I would not have seen this coming. There were murder hornets this year. 2020 is insane. But that said,
Here's what I'm saying. If ever there was a year built for opera, it's 2020 because it's it's the most exaggerated,
it is. That'll
heightened thing.
be the name of the opera, 2020.
No, 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 no. I don't want to go see that one.